The Federation diplomatic hall stretched like a vast metal cavern, its walls gleaming with holographic displays of 1,000 different star systems. Commander Park Ji-won walked slowly across the polished floor, her boots clicking against metal that had been forged by alien hands long before humanity had discovered fire. Behind her, 5 other human delegates followed, their heads held high despite knowing they were about to face rejection once again. Ji-won had made this journey 12 times before. Each time, she had hoped things would be different. Each time, she had returned to Earth with empty promises and half-hearted apologies from species who viewed humans as little more than talking animals with useful, opposable thumbs. The Draknari elder sat on a floating throne that pulsed with soft blue light. His 6 arms were folded across his chest, and his triple-jointed legs were crossed with an air of boredom that made Ji-won's stomach tighten. Around him, other alien representatives lounged in their designated areas. The Vortani delegates floated in spheres of liquid, their tentacles waving in patterns that might have been amusement. The crystalline hegemony's representatives stood like living sculptures, their bodies reflecting light in ways that hurt human eyes to look at directly. "State your business, human," the Draknari elder's voice boomed through the hall, translated. Instantly by the Federation's universal systems, Ji-won stepped forward, activating her personal hologram display. Images of human colonies, mining operations, and construction projects appeared in the air above her hand. "Honored delegates, I come to request better conditions for human workers across Federation space. Our latest reports show that human death rates in Federation facilities are 50% higher than those of other species doing similar work." A ripple of something that might have been laughter passed through the alien assembly. The Vortani representative spoke, its voice like bubbling mud. "Death rates are irrelevant when the species reproduces as quickly as humans do. Supply exceeds demand." Ji-won's jaw clenched, but she pressed on. "We also request representation on the Federation Council. Humans now comprise 23% of the Federation's workforce, yet we have no voice in decisions that affect our people." The crystalline hegemony representative chimed like breaking glass. "Representation requires cognitive capability. Humans lack the mental processing power for governance." "Furthermore," Ji-won continued, her voice steadier than she felt, "we request access to advanced Federation technologies. Humans have proven capable of adapting and improving existing systems. Given the opportunity—" "Enough," the Draknari elder interrupted, leaning forward on his throne. His 3 eyes fixed on Ji-won with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her. "Your species lacks the intellectual capacity for greater responsibilities. Accept your station. You are miners, builders, cleaners. Be grateful the Federation permits your existence at all." The hall fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the life support systems. Ji-won felt the weight of failure settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed dozens of arguments, gathered mountains of evidence. None of it mattered. "I see," she said quietly. "Then we have nothing more to discuss here." As she turned to leave, the Draknari elder's voice followed her. "Remember, human, that your species' arrogance grows tiresome. Perhaps it is time to remind you why your people agreed to serve the Federation in the first place." Ji-won stopped, walking. For a moment something flickered in her eyes, something dark and fierce that none of the aliens noticed. Then she continued walking, her delegates following in silence. The journey back to their ship took 20 minutes. Not one of them spoke until they were safely inside their vessel, the doors sealed against the artificial atmosphere of the Federation station. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Hong Min-soo, the youngest member of their delegation. "What do we do now?" Ji-won stared out the viewport at the massive alien structures surrounding them. Ships the size of cities drifted past, their crews never giving the small human vessel a second thought. "We return to Earth," she said. "We report what happened here. And then?" Ji-won was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was so soft that Min-soo had to lean closer to hear her. "Then we wait for the Draknari to make their first mistake." Neither of them knew that across the galaxy, on a mining world called Kepler 442b, that mistake was already being made. 300 human miners were about to die because an alien overseer wanted to meet his quota early. and when news of those deaths reached Earth, something would awaken in humanity that had been sleeping since their species first learned to hate. The morning alarms on Kepler 442b rang at exactly 0500 hours, just like they had for the past 18 months. Kim Ha-jin rolled out of his narrow bunk, his bones already aching from yesterday's work. At 42, he was one of the older miners on the planet, but his hands were still steady and his eyes still sharp enough to spot dangerous cracks in the cavern walls. The mess hall was full of tired faces and quiet conversations. Ha-jin sat with his usual group, Park Do-hyun, Lee Jin-ho, and Song Min-seo. They ate their protein bars in silence, listening to the other miners complain about the new Draknari overseer. "He's pushing quotas again," Do-hyun whispered, stirring his synthetic coffee. 20% higher than last week. The eastern tunnels are getting unstable, Jin-ho added. "I saw some nasty cracks yesterday. Reported them 3 times, but nobody listens to human reports," Min-seo finished, shaking his head. The Draknari overseer entered the mess hall just as the breakfast period ended. Carvex was 7 feet tall with 4 arms, and his scales shifted from blue to red when he was angry. Right now they were a sickly yellow, the color that meant he was impatient. "Workers," his voice boomed through the translator collar around his neck. "Crystal extraction will increase today. The Federation requires more yield. Eastern tunnels will be fully operational." Ha-jin stood up slowly. "Sir, the eastern tunnels show signs of instability. We need to run safety checks first." Carvex's scales deepened to orange. "Safety checks are for valuable assets. You are replaceable. Extract the crystals, or be replaced." The miners filed out in silence. As they passed the equipment room, Ha-jin noticed that several safety devices were marked out of order. The structural support beams looked thinner than usual. Everything pointed to disaster, but voices like his carried no weight in Federation space. Deep in the eastern tunnels, the work was brutal. The rare crystals grew in tight spaces where humans had to crawl on their bellies, chipping carefully at the stone. Above them, the rock groaned with each impact of their tools. "Ha-jin," called young Hiop, a new miner only 20 years old. "This section feels wrong. The walls are moving." Ha-jin crawled over to check. His experienced eyes saw what Hiop had noticed. Tiny stress fractures spread across the ceiling like spiderwebs. "We need to get out of here," he said, but before they could move, the earth shuddered. A deep rumble filled the tunnels, growing louder and more violent with each second. Somewhere below, a support beam snapped with a sound like thunder. "Cave in," Ha-jin shouted. "Everybody out!" Chaos erupted as hundreds of miners scrambled through narrow passages. The walls shook, dust filled the air, and the emergency lights flickered and died. Ha-jin grabbed Hiop's arm and pushed him toward the main tunnel. Behind them, the mountain fell. The sound was indescribable, like the planet itself was screaming. Rock crashed down, crushing everything in its path. The force threw Ha-jin against a wall, but he kept running. Through the dust and darkness, he could hear voices calling for help. Then silence as the tons of stone settled. When Ha-jin finally reached the surface, only 62 miners emerged from the eastern tunnels. 337 others were trapped beneath the collapsed mountain. "We need rescue crews," Ha-jin gasped to the surface coordinator. "Heavy equipment, drilling rigs. We can still save some of them." The coordinator, a human named Kim Sun-ho, was already on his communicator. "Priority rescue operation, Eastern Tunnels. Maximum resources needed immediately." Carvex arrived 10 minutes later, his scales now deep purple with annoyance. "No rescue. Operation will be authorized," he announced. "The cost exceeds the value of the trapped assets." Sun-ho stared at him. "Assets? Those are people, human beings." "They are expendable labor units," Carvex replied coldly. "More will be shipped from Earth within a month. Return to work." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ha-jin stepped forward. "No, no." Carvex's scales flushed red. "We're going to dig them out, with or without permission." Other miners nodded and moved to stand beside Ha-jin. But Carvex activated his shock staff, the weapon humming with deadly energy. "Any human who defies orders will be eliminated." Armed Draknari guards appeared, surrounding the miners. The message was clear. Go back to work, or join the dead in the tunnels. That night, Word spread through human space faster than any official report. On cargo ships, orbital stations, and distant colonies, humans huddled around screens and listened to the truth. 337 miners dead, buried alive by alien greed, abandoned by alien law. Captain Choi Mi-yeon was in her quarters aboard the transport ship Unity when the news reached her. She watched the footage 17 times, memorizing the faces of the dead. Her crew found her 3 hours later, still staring. "At the screen, Captain?" asked her first officer. "Orders?" Mi-yeon's fists were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. When she spoke, her voice was quiet as death. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, full encryption." "What message should I send?" She turned to face him and he stepped back. Something in her eyes had changed. Something that had been sleeping was now awake. "Tell them," she said slowly, "that we're done being expendable." Dr. Yoon Tae-hee had not slept in 3 days. Her laboratory on Mars Station Alpha looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Pieces of metal, circuit boards, and chemical compounds covered every surface. Coffee cups and food containers piled up on her desk, forgotten in the rush of discovery, but Tae-hee barely noticed the mess. Her mind was on fire with ideas that seemed to come from nowhere, weapons that should have been impossible with human technology were taking shape under her hands. She worked with a fever that frightened her assistants. "Doctor," said her lab partner Kim Won-sik, "you need to rest. You've been working for 72 hours straight." Tae-hee looked up from her latest creation, a device that could turn an enemy's own shield generator into a bomb. Her eyes were bloodshot, but they burned with fierce intelligence. "The Draknari say we lack the mental capacity for advanced work," she said, connecting 2 wires with hands that didn't shake despite her exhaustion. "Let's prove them wrong." Across human space, similar scenes played out. Scientists who had spent years on basic projects suddenly found themselves creating miracles. Engineers who had struggled with simple repairs were designing battle cruisers that made alien ships look like toys. It was as if humanity's anger had unlocked something that had always been there waiting. On Earth, Colonel Nam So-hee sat in the military archives deep beneath Seoul. Around her, holographic displays showed thousands of years of human warfare. She scrolled through the files with growing excitement, stopping at the most unusual tactics her ancestors had used. "Look at this," she said to her aide, Lieutenant Kim Jae-won. The display showed ancient humans hunting mammoth creatures 10 times their size, persistence hunting. Our ancestors could run prey to death, following for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Jae-hwan frowned. "How does that help us fight spaceships?" So-hee smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "The Draknari expect honorable combat. Stand in formation, fire weapons, winner takes all. But humans never fought fair when we were outmatched." She pulled up another file. Celtic warriors, Viking raiders, Apache fighters, they all used hit-and-run tactics. Strike fast, disappear, strike again when the enemy thinks they're safe. She spent hours downloading every file about unconventional warfare, night raids, sabotage operations, psychological warfare. The Federation species had evolved from predators who fought directly. They had never faced prey that refused to die, quietly. Meanwhile, in the asteroid mining stations near Jupiter, mechanic Lee Da-yun was having thoughts that scared her. She had always been good with machines, but now she understood them in ways that seemed impossible. Looking at a Federation patrol boat, she could see exactly which components to sabotage to make it look like an accident. The knowledge felt like it came from somewhere else. "It's like we're remembering things we never learned," she said to her friend Park Yun-ho. "Maybe we are," he replied, holding up a list of alien ship vulnerabilities he had somehow figured out. "Maybe our ancestors passed down more than we thought." The Federation's monitoring stations began detecting strange energy signatures from human space. On the Draknari command ship Destroyer of Worlds, Admiral Zektoth watched the readings with slight concern. "What are the humans doing?" he asked his science officer. The officer's scales shifted to uncertain purple. "Unknown, sir. Their energy patterns don't match any known technology, but the signatures are very weak, probably primitive experiments." Zektoth snorted, a sound like rocks grinding together. Let them play with their toys. When we crush their rebellion, we'll take their new gadgets as trophies. But on Lunar Base, Captain Choi Mi-yeon was testing one of those toys. The small device in her hand could make a Federation ship's engines overload without triggering any alarms. Dr. Tae-hee had called it a resonance disruptor. It used the enemy's own power against them. "How did you know this would work?" Mi-yeon asked. Tae-hee shrugged. "I just knew, like the knowledge was always there, waiting for the right moment." Mi-yeon nodded. She understood. Since Kepler 442b, all of humanity seemed to be awakening from a long sleep. IQ tests showed average scores jumping by 30 points. Engineers solved problems that had stumped them for years. Even children were building things that amazed their teachers. In the depths of space, aboard the research vessel Pioneer, Dr. Kim Han-jun made a discovery that changed everything. He was studying the brains of humans who had shown the most dramatic improvements. What he found made him call an emergency meeting. "Look at this," he said, projecting his scan results. "Neural pathways that were dormant are suddenly active. Sections of the brain we thought were useless are lighting up like Christmas trees." "You're saying we're evolving?" asked Dr. Osinai, his research partner. "No," Han-jun replied quietly. "I think we're finally using what we always had. Human brains are incredibly complex, but we only use about 10%. What if trauma, anger, and necessity can unlock the rest?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't becoming something new. They were finally becoming what they were meant to be. Above them, Federation sensors detected another energy surge from human space. The aliens dismissed it as usual. Soon they would learn that underestimating an angry human was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. The first sign something was wrong came at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. The Draknari patrol ship Thunder's Edge was conducting a routine sweep of the outer rim when its sensors simply stopped working. The captain, a veteran warrior named Kazleth, assumed it was a minor malfunction. He assumed wrong. The Thunder's Edge exploded exactly 37 seconds later. There was no warning, no visible attacker, no energy discharge. One moment the ship was there. The next it was a cloud of burning metal floating in space. The emergency beacon lasted long enough to transmit 4 words. "Humans, everywhere, can't see." Admiral Lee Ji-hyo watched the destruction from her command ship, hidden behind a small asteroid. She had been waiting in this position for 6 hours, her crew silent as ghosts. Around her, 49 other human vessels waited in similar hiding spots. The Federation had taught them patience through centuries of oppression. Now they would use that patience as a weapon. "Signal the others," she said quietly. "Begin Phase 1. Across Federation space, human ships emerged from nowhere. They didn't come in the proud battle formations the aliens expected. Instead, they appeared as single vessels, scattered and chaotic, striking at what seemed like random targets. The Draknari command ship Fist of Conquest received 37 distress calls in the first hour. Commander Vexthul studied the battle reports with growing confusion. "They're not attacking our main fleet," he growled to his bridge crew. "They're hitting supply lines, communication relays, maintenance stations." His tactical officer, scales bright orange with worry, brought up a star map. Red marks showed human attacks across dozens of systems. "Sir, they're cutting our logistics. Network to pieces, but there's no pattern, no grand strategy." "Primitive minds," Vexthul snorted. "They don't understand real warfare. Send the Third Fleet to protect our supply lines. The humans will reveal themselves eventually." But when the Third Fleet arrived at what should have been a major battle, they found only wreckage. The human ships had vanished like smoke. 40 minutes later, those same humans attacked the Federation's main communication hub on the other side of the galaxy. On the bridge of humanity's fury, Captain Choi Mi-yeon smiled as her engineers worked another miracle. They had taken a simple Federation maintenance drone and filled it with explosive gel. To enemy sensors, it looked exactly like the repair drones that serviced every major Federation facility. "Maintenance drone requesting docking permission," her communications officer reported. "Permission granted," came the reply from the Federation starbase. "Bay 7. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. Admiral Zektoth Supreme Commander of the Federation forces, stood on the bridge of his dreadnought Absolute Victory and screamed at his communication officer. "How are they jamming our signals? Their technology is centuries behind ours." The officer's tentacles writhed with fear. "They're not jamming us, sir. They're using our own communication network against us. Every message we send is being redirected, scrambled, or turned into a virus that crashes our systems. Impossible. Our encryption is perfect." "That's what we thought, sir. But somehow they've learned to read it. Not just read it. They're predicting our messages before we send them." Zektoth's rage was interrupted by another report. The humans had somehow triggered a chain reaction in the Federation's main shipyard. 17 battlecruisers ready to launch had been turned into bombs by a virus that made their own power cores overload. Dr. Yoon Tai-hee's weapons were proving more effective than anyone had imagined. Her resonance disruptors could make enemy shields collapse. Her neural scramblers made alien crew members see false readings on their instruments. Her quantum mines existed in several dimensions at once, making them nearly impossible to detect or destroy. But the humans' greatest weapon wasn't technology at all. On the second day of the war, the Federation tried to negotiate. They sent an envoy to Admiral Jihyo under a flag of truce. The meeting took place on a neutral space station, with careful protocols and lengthy ceremonies. The Federation diplomat, a dignified Vortani named Korlan, spoke formally. "Respected Human Admiral, the Federation wishes to discuss terms for ending this conflict. We are prepared to offer improved working conditions." "No," Jihyo interrupted. Korlan's translator collar struggled with the simple word. "Perhaps I misunderstood. You reject our offer of negotiation?" "You called us expendable," Jihyo said, her voice calm as ice. "You let 337 of our people die. Then you tried to make us accept it." "War profits no one," Korlan tried again. "Surely we can reach an agreement. We tried agreement for 50 years, Jihyo replied. "It didn't work. So now we speak your language." The envoy left in confusion, reporting that humans were impossible to reason with. The Federation responded by sending their most elite battle group to crush the rebellion once and for all. That battle group lasted exactly 1 day. The humans had somehow turned the Federation's own weapons against them. Shields became prisons. Engines became bombs. Communication systems became weapons that drove crews insane with feedback loops. By the third day, Federation space was chaos. Their mighty fleets were scattered, crippled, or destroyed. Their leaders were cut off from their forces. Their technology had become their enemy. The aliens finally understood what they faced. Humans didn't fight with honor. They didn't follow rules. When they were backed into a corner, they became something worse than ruthless. They became creative. The once proud Federation Council chamber now stood empty except for debris and broken furniture. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across walls that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. In the damaged corridors, alien beings waited nervously for news of what would come next. President Limisul walked through the ruins with steady steps, her shoes clicking against cracked marble. Behind her followed a small group of humans who would soon become the most important people in the galaxy. They carried no weapons, wore no armor, but every alien they passed stepped aside quickly. The war had lasted only 3 days. In that time, humanity had dismantled the most powerful military force in galactic history. The Federation fleet existed only as floating wreckage. Their command structure was gone. Their technology had been turned into a weapon against them. But what surprised the aliens most was what happened next. The humans didn't execute prisoners. They didn't claim rich worlds for themselves. They didn't even demand revenge for Kepler 442b. Instead, they started rebuilding. In the main assembly hall, the survivors gathered. Draknari military commanders sat next to Vortani diplomats. Crystalline hegemony representatives stood beside insectoid Zexkari. All of them watched the humans with a mixture of fear and confusion. Limisul stood at the center of the hall, speaking without amplification. Her voice was clear and calm. "Respected beings of all species, we are here to discuss the future, not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors sharing the same galaxy. A Draknari general, his scales dulled with defeat, spoke up. "What are your terms, human? What tribute do you demand?" Limisul smiled, and several aliens flinched. "Tribute? No. Cooperation? Yes," she gestured, and holographic displays showed the new structure of governance. The new Galactic Council will have representatives from all species, but membership will be based on contribution, not military power or age of civilization. A Vortani, elder bubbled with indignation. "Our species has ruled for 10,000 years. We have earned our position." "You've earned nothing but the fear of others," Limisul replied calmly. "Age doesn't grant wisdom. Power doesn't create justice." Commissioner Kang Hanjun stepped forward, carrying a thick document. His job had been difficult, studying the safety records of every species in the Federation. What he found had made him sick with anger. Every year, he announced, over 50,000 beings die in industrial accidents across Federation space. Most of these deaths are preventable. The old government called them acceptable losses. He activated another display showing accident statistics by species. The numbers were staggering. Humans had died at the highest rate, but every species at the bottom of the Federation's hierarchy had suffered. "Today that changes," Kang Hanjun declared. "New safety protocols will be mandatory on every world, every station, every ship. No species is expendable. No life is acceptable to lose," the aliens murmured among themselves. This wasn't conquest as they understood it. Where were the demands for slaves, the claims to territory, the executions of former leaders? Dr. Yun Tai-hee, the person whose weapons had won the war, spoke next. But instead of describing new military technology, she presented plans for medical research. The Federation restricted access to advanced medicine based on species hierarchy. Some races received the best treatments. Others, like humans, were given only basic care. She smiled with genuine warmth. "We're sharing all our medical advances with everyone. Disease doesn't care about politics." As the day progressed, the aliens began to understand the humans' strange approach to victory. They weren't interested in ruling. They wanted to fix what was broken. Captain Choi Mi-yeon, the woman who had orchestrated the Federation's defeat, now presented plans for economic cooperation. Trade will be free and fair. No more exploitation of worker species. No more tribute systems. Admiral Lee Ji-hyo announced the dissolution of the Federation military hierarchy. Defense fleets will be integrated. All species will contribute equally to galactic security. An old Draknari elder, his voice shaking with age and defeat, asked the question they all wanted answered. "Why? You could take everything, you could rule as we did. Why choose this path?" Limisul was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her words would be remembered for generations. "You asked what happens when humans get angry. You assumed we would be like you, destructive, cruel, taking pleasure in others' pain." She looked at each delegation in turn. "You were wrong. When humans get angry, we don't just destroy. We identify what made us angry, and we fix it. We rebuild. Better." Commissioner Kang Hanjun added, "We were angry because 337 miners died unnecessarily, so we make sure it never happens again to anyone." The Draknari elders' scales shifted to deep blue, a color none of them had seen before. Later they would learn it meant profound respect, mixed with fear. Over the following months, the new Galactic Council proved its worth. Species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground. Technology was shared freely. Trade flourished, without exploitation. But the aliens never forgot the lesson of the 3-day war. Humanity was dangerous not because they were violent, but because they channeled violence into positive change. They were deadliest when they turned rage into justice. In quiet moments, when the new order seemed too good to be true, alien leaders would remember those 3 days when everything changed. They would look at their human colleagues with respect, understanding, and just a touch of healthy fear. The universe had learned what happened when humans got truly angry, and it would never forget.